Well, first I want to say thank you to Vish and Miriam and the whole staff for bringing me up here and allowing me to speak and share some of the things that I've seen and experienced in the past year. In fact, it was about 1 year ago today that my friend John, who's a filmmaker, and I were here in Sardinia talking to some of the oldest people on the planet. And it was a tremendous pleasure for us to dive into that world, because where I came from was a chronic disease model, right? I was working with people with lots of chronic issues, and the whole goal in the US and the West right now is to solve disease, to treat disease. And we have a number of methods for doing this. And we're moving forward, and it's becoming a better practice. But one of the things that I recognized working in this field was that there was a severe lack of understanding what health is, where it comes from, and how to teach health or healthy lifestyles. Because this is one of the things I think that is not recognized right now, is that we don't know how to live in a healthy way because we've gone so far away from our origins, if you will. Right? We have evolved on this planet in a certain way of life, and we are now indoors 95% of the time. It's a recent study in the US has shown that prisoners get more outdoor time than children. I mean, this is a truly sad thing that we're seeing. And we don't know how to interact with this new modern world. And it's only going to get crazier and crazier as new technology comes about. So we have to re-engage our world and learn what it means to interact with this world in a way that's going to facilitate health and not promote disease. So this is the whole point of the film that we created. It's called the Human Longevity Project. We traveled around to the blue zones, and you guys heard from Michelle Poulin earlier, who I've had a pleasure to speak with in depth about going to these places, because this was one of the things I wanted to do, right? If I'm going to talk about longevity and health, I mean, I'm only 37. I haven't earned that right yet, right? So I had to go to these places, talk to these people, and get a sense for what their life was really like. And so we went around to Okinawa, we went to Ikaria, Greece, we went to Sardinia, of course, here, and in the peninsula of Costa Rica. And you can see some of the amazing people that we spoke with. On the top right there is Giulio. He's 104 years old. He's from Sardinia, one of the most amazing people we met. In the middle is Hideko, who is 97, who at 95 years old was still climbing orange trees before her daughters told her to stop because they were afraid for her health. But she was still doing these things. So this really showed us what health can be like when we get to our 80s, 90s, and even into 100. So this journey that we embarked upon, I think we had some preconceptions of what to expect. But there was a lot of things that I think we experienced that we didn't fully grasp until we were there. And I think when we talk about longevity and we look at these people that are 100 years old or 95 years old, we have to understand the historical context to their life. If they're 95 right now and they live in Ikaria, Greece, this means in 1950, they were living in 1950 in Greece without electricity. There was no ability to transport food. There was no refrigeration. There was no freezers. They didn't have indoor lighting like we have today. They used carbide lamps, using gas. So their entire life was different. So we can't look at a 95-year-old today or a 100-year-old today and say, what are you doing? Okay, you're eating beans, you're drinking wine, you've got great community, wonderful. We have to look at what they did in 1930, 1940, and what their life was really like. And what you find is when you talk to all these people, you see you see the same things showing up over and over again. And so this is a kitchen in Okinawa, and I don't know the time frame of which this would have actually been the case. This is sort of a mock-up, but hopefully it gives you a sense for how life might have been, right? If you're operating in this way, everything is slower, right? You're literally going by the rhythm of the day. The daily cycle of things is guided by the sun. You get up with the sun, you go to bed with the sun, your crops, everything is guided by this rhythm. And so in a sense, there is no way to speed up. There is nothing to speed up, right? If you're growing squash, you can't speed up this process and grow squash faster. So we have to recognize that they lived in a way that was a little bit different than we live today. And because of this, we have to take a new approach than some of the ways that they lived, right? I mean, I don't know a lot of people, again, 97 years old, tilling up their soil with a hoe, right? Getting ready for planting. And yes, some of us do this, and it's wonderful. But this is not the traditional way that many of us in this room get our food, is from our backyards operating like this. And when it comes to community, this is, by the way, this is Villa Grande. This is Sardinia. This is the blue zone of Sardinia, these sort of village behind there. Community was something that they had to have. This is not an option for them. When you're living in a village of 30 people or 50 people, this was your livelihood. In fact, there was no competition. It makes no sense to compete because you're all there working together for the common good. Somebody needs their house fixed, they would come together and fix the house. If the community roads needed fixing or paths, they would all chip in to do this. So community was not an option. This wasn't a thing that they understood was beneficial for health, therefore let's go do community. This was something that they used to come together, to accomplish things, and to build better lives for each other. So I think we need to maybe reframe some of the way we think about community, because we don't need community anymore in a survival sense. We can live without community. We can't thrive without community, and we can't thrive without that connection. But it's not a necessity like it was in a lot of these villages 50, 60, 70 years ago. And even today, what you see is because modern technology is infiltrating these places, that's changing. And their health is changing as well. So these blue zones, as they've been known, may not be blue zones very much longer. In fact, Okinawa is probably not a blue zone because of modern life. Western civilization has come in. They have something they call the hamburger syndrome now with McDonald's. They've got Starbucks there. So things are changing. So we have to look at this stuff in a historical context. Now, the other context that we can look about, or we can think about longevity, we got the past, and we can look to the past. We can also look to the future. And this is where things are going to get really weird. They're going to get really hairy. And we have to take a little precaution, I think. There's some cool aspects to it. We can use, in fact, we're using it right now. We have light therapies. We've got magnetic therapies, electrical therapies. Stem cells are coming onto the scene in a major way. And we've also got these biological agents that we can use. So things are going to be cool, and we're going to be able to use this stuff to really push health into a new wave. But I think if we don't bring the things from the past along with us, we are likely to go astray and start using these things just on a whim and not understand the things that really fill us up and create longevity and a healthier life overall. This is kind of a weird thing right now. In the US and many Western countries, we're actually seeing life expectancy decline. Meanwhile, we've got experts projecting that we're going to live longer lives. So how do we wrestle with this? What's going on? And this is a perfect example of something that is devastating to our health, especially in the US right now. And this opioid epidemic shows me that we have lots of pain. We have suffering. We have lots of things going on under the surface that we don't know how to address. Right? And it all comes back to these same things that you've been hearing about: purpose and community and connection. How do we bring these together to facilitate health? When we don't have those things, we start to see these things happen. So we have to look at what's happening now to create this slide in health and life expectancy. But then we have to think about what's coming down the pike. And if you listen to people like Peter Diamandis or Ray Kurzweil, Larry Page, Aubrey de Grey, we're talking about living forever, right? Curing aging like it's a disease. I really struggle with this concept. And I love the innovative big thinking, but I'm not so sure that aging is a disease and that dying is a problem, right? So I think we have to put longevity into the proper context, which is to say that maybe there's a journey in this process. Maybe there's a purpose to get to growing old and becoming 95 and not being able to move around a ton. I think there's different parts of life that, as young people in this room, we haven't experienced yet. So it's hard for us to really acknowledge this. But yet when you talk to these people around the world that are 90, 95, you find some pretty amazing things. They're really happy with where they're at. They're ready to die in some instances. They have a really great relationship with death. Here, we don't like to talk about death. It's this thing that sort of remains in the back channels, right? And so I think we have to bring a new awareness around what death represents. What does death mean to us? What does living mean to us? Why are we so afraid of dying that we want to preserve every day that we can because we don't know how to live today? I mean, I think this is probably more what's happening, is that we are afraid to live, thus we're afraid to die, and let's just extend this thing for as long as we can. So I think we really have to be careful with how we think about this process of longevity before we start introducing designer babies into this world. And this is happening. I mean, it's a really sad reality, in my opinion, because to me, nature perfects everything, and this is completely not the right direction for us. But these things will come, and we'll deal with them as they come. But I think if we bring the proper philosophy, proper context to what aging is, what health is, what disease is, then we can attack these things in a better way. In fact, you just heard a great example of this from the happiness perspective. We're here for a lot of reasons, but the pains that we experience are such amazing teachers. And if we allow them to teach us, if we can take these physical pains, these emotional pains, spiritual pains, and use them to grow, to learn, I think this is the process of life. It is not about getting rid of these things, which is seemingly what we try to do so often. But there's a big thing about the futurists that I think I strongly disagree with. They have this concept that we can cure aging, that we can get rid of disease, that death is a problem. But I think what they're missing, they're taking a human-centric viewpoint to this, which is that you are a human and we can fix all the little things going on in your human body. But if I were to ask you what you really are, the correct answer is you're actually more viral and bacterial and fungal DNA, RNA, genetics than you are human genetics. It's not even close. You have way more genetics coming from non-human parts of you. And this is a fascinating concept when you think about it. And they're not there just because the world's a dirty place. They serve valuable functions. In fact, some experts now predict that about 90 to potentially 98% of function is carried out or dictated or facilitated by these organisms that live within you and on you. So that may seem like not a big deal, but I guess the question I have for you is, who are you? Who controls you? Is it actually you? So I think there's a bigger ecosystem that we need to consider here, and this idea of a holobiont, a number of genetic components, DNA and RNA mechanisms, all communicating to one another, both internally and externally, is really a key factor here. I don't think we can achieve longevity unless we think about the greater community, the greater ecosystem. And we talk about community in terms of human-to-human interaction, and that's critical. But I think we have an inner ecosystem that we have to think about in terms of community as well. Right now, Rudolf Steiner warned that if we start to see the bees go, all life goes. Bees and trees. 2016, in the US, we have the first few species of bees on the endangered species list. How can we achieve human longevity if we're destroying the entire planet? If we're destroying the bees? If we're destroying all parts of life around us? So the futurists need to, I think, take a bigger, broader perspective on this, a global perspective, which is it's not a human problem. It's an entire ecosystem problem that we have to solve if we want to achieve longevity individually. We also see the rainforests have problems. Polar bears have perfluorinated chemicals in them from plastics. This is a big problem, and we need to come together and work individually to solve this problem that is affecting us globally. So if we don't take that viewpoint, I think we're going to run into struggles. And so just to give you a little more sense of this, we have this greater metagenome, hologenome, and we have this rainforest inside of us that is all working together, all working in synergy. But we also have the outer ecosystems. So what's really interesting, instead of maybe focusing on ourselves as this human entity that we need to optimize, what if we started thinking about all the other ecosystems and not ourself? What if we started, every decision we made was for the betterment of the ecology, the external environmental ecology, that outer ecosystem? What if we started to think about how we can improve the inner ecosystem that's within us? Some of you may have heard of the gut microbiome or the gut microbiota. This is a number of bacteria and viral species that live within our guts that guide most of our function. Talk to our brain, they talk to our organs, they live in our skin, they live on our skin, they're in our organs, it's everywhere. And if we think about how we can treat this inner ecosystem well, and think about how we can treat that outer ecosystem well, then we get the reward from that. Anything that we put out into the environment will inevitably come back and hurt us. It's a mirror. It's nothing but a mirror. Every time we poison the environment, we take on the harm. And it may not be you directly, it might be your kids. So we have to look at this in a greater span of time, a greater ecosystem, a greater ecology, but we can't forget about the inner ecology. Right now, between the medications, the birth control pills, the chemicals, the toxins, the metals, all these things that we're taking in are damaging our inner ecosystem. So it's not a human problem. This is an ecosystem problem. And when we can fix this, we get our health back. This also brings into another component that we witnessed in these blue zones, was this idea of community and altruism, right? This idea that I'm acting on behalf of somebody else, not necessarily for myself. And this, I think, you heard it actually in the last presentation, holding no grudges. This was the most common thing we heard from people over the age of 90 that we talked to. After every person, I finished the interview with every centenarian or elder around the world, and I finished with this one question. I said, if there was one piece of advice you could offer me to live a long, healthy, happy life, what would it be? And there was some variation in the answers. Some talked about some food stuff and these type of things, but ultimately, when they got done with their answer, almost every single one of them included this concept of treating everyone with respect, not holding any grudges. And when you hear this 25 times from people in Okinawa and Ikaria and Costa Rica, you're a fool if you don't listen to it, right? So the number one thing for their health, happiness, and longevity was to have good relationships, maintain good relationships, and hold no grudges with anybody around them. So I think we need to think about this in a communal perspective, altruistic perspective, and a self perspective collectively so that we can achieve this state of longevity individually as well as in the greater community as a whole. Anybody hear about this story? Anybody? Okay, we got a couple. This is a fascinating story. So if anybody's familiar with David Goodall, he's a scientist. He's 104 years old, and he got to the point in his life where he's like, there's no point for me to be here. I can't really hear anything. I can't see anything as well. I can't drive. Life for him slid downhill after 85 when he lost his driver's license. But he was really bummed out about life. In fact, when somebody asked him about his impending death that was brought on by euthanasia, he said, I'm looking forward to it. So there's a lot of things in there I think we can extract. One is that at 104, maybe you just don't get afraid of dying anymore and you're okay with the whole concept, right? Which I think is a really good thing. And I think a lot of people that have a greater spiritual understanding, religious understanding, something that's connecting them to something greater than themselves, they die well. They die peacefully. They go into that next process with an open heart and open mind. So I think it was interesting to hear him say that he's looking forward to it. The other side of it is that he also said that he has no joy, right? His lack of mobility and ability to see things brought him no joy. And so I think this should show us that there's meaning and purpose in the very mundane things. And we saw this in the blue zones as well. They lived life in a completely different way that we don't appreciate anymore. We have bottled water around over here. Do you know what it took for them to get water? I mean, we don't appreciate the simple things. And so this idea of meaning, I think, above this idea of big purpose for your life, but meaning, holding meaning in the smallest things can be so powerful. And so when he, for him, lost his meaning, his ability to see, his ability to move around, he was unable to transform that and find new meaning in other things. And who am I to criticize? But I think it should show us that if we can find meaning in big things and small things, waking up every day with air in your lungs, having this gratitude for the most simple and basic things, I think can carry us a long way. But the other interesting thing about this story is that when we compare it to Giulio, who's 104, same age, he was riding his bike for us in Sardinia, just up here in Villa Grande. He seemed to enjoy life still. He could move around. He was able to see. He was able to converse. He still worked with his hands and did woodworking. So he still found meaning, even though his mobility and his ability to engage life was definitely declined. He still wanted to engage life, and there was no desire to die. I asked him why he lived such a long time, and he said, it's up to God, right? So there was no stress about living long or living well or living anything other than doing what he wanted to do each day and finding meaning and purpose in the mundane things in life. So I think this kind of culminates into this Greek philosophy, if you will, which I sort of chose the Greeks because we went to Greece and they seem to still hold this in Ikaria, this idea of philosophy. And I think right now we have a big focus on hedonism, right? This idea of maximum pleasure. And if you really dig into that philosophy, it's maximum pleasure over the course of a lifetime. It's not necessarily pleasure in the moment, because pleasure in the moment can actually decrease pleasure in the lifetime and actually bring you more pain. But I think this is what I'm seeing around me, is that we are trying for this maximum pleasure every single day, and how do we get this thing? But the other part of this hedonism is tranquility and joy, lack of fear, right? So letting go of fear, I think, is a major component to health and longevity. In fact, one of the things that I noticed when I was working with a lot of clients, they came in with digestive issues, hormonal issues, cancers, autoimmune conditions, you name it, the spectrum. Every single one of them had an emotional trauma underneath it that played a role. And you could see this fear come up in language, in the way that they moved, the way that they held their body. And so this idea of health is probably more of a mental, emotional, spiritual, psycho-spiritual state that I think we understand or that we recognize. And so getting rid of fear, addressing the things that are inside us that need to come out, looking at who we really are, what we really want, and addressing these pains that our subconscious loves to just bury. Bringing those to the surface will allow us to heal, to live a longer, healthier life. Because in these blue zones, you don't see this. You don't see a lot of emotional traumas. You don't see a lot of family traumas. You don't see a lot of these issues that we've created for ourselves through separation. You know, in fact, they live with their family most of their life. You know, they either the parents take care of them till some point, and then at some point, the kids start taking care of the elders. And everybody's got a role. So this purpose, as we get into our 70s, 80s, this is probably one of the biggest things that we are struggling with right now in a Western culture, is that we can't find purpose at that late stage of our life. But if we have a family, if we have a role in our society, if we feel like we belong and we're contributing, right? We all want to contribute. If we're contributing to our society in the ages of 70, 80, 90, then we feel like we still need to be there. But if we don't, death is right around the corner. So I think we have to ask ourselves, do we want to live a long life, right? Or do we want to live a fulfilled life? And what does that mean to live a fulfilled life? Vic Stracker, who is a professor at the University of Michigan, talks about his daughter, who at 6 months old had to have a heart transplant. This is one of the youngest, if not the youngest, heart transplant they've ever done at this point. And she had a heart transplant. It was successful, but they told Vic, they said, we don't know how long she's going to make it. It could be any day. We've never done this. We have no idea. So what do you think that does to you when you're told that your daughter could die any day? All of a sudden, every day is the most important day. We're going to maximize today because we don't know if there's tomorrow. And of course, she's just a child. She has no idea. But as she gets older, she miraculously, she's 3 and 4 and 7. At some point, she starts to have this comprehension of, wow, every day could be my last. And that prognosis never changed throughout her life. Every day could be your last. So imagine what that does. Imagine how meaningful every day becomes. Imagine how purposeful your life becomes. It was her 19th birthday or something to that effect. She just graduated high school and was going into college or something to that effect. And I think it was spring break maybe. And the whole family was down in Florida. And his daughter turns to her boyfriend and said, "I'm so happy. I could die right now and I'd be fine." Next day she died. So her boyfriend had to tell Vic this story. And this changed Vic's life forever. Changed the way he taught at the university. He started treating all the kids like they were his own child. He was there for everybody. So at 19 years old, she didn't get much of a chance. But to say and to recognize, "I'm so happy I could die right now and be fine," I think she figured it out. That's not a very long life, but man, that's purposeful. So I want to ask you, could you say the same thing right now? I could die right now and I'd be happy. I don't know that I could. I would love to sit up here and tell you that I could, but there's a lot of things I still want to do. There's a lot of fears that I haven't overcome. So I think these are the challenges that we face every day. It's not about living a long life. It's irrelevant. It's a byproduct of doing the right things, but living a big life, living a meaningful life, living a purposeful life, enjoying each day. This is what the Stoicism is all about. This is what eudaimonia is all about. So can we bring in wisdom into our life? Can we respect moderation? I think in a wealthy world, in a world of abundance that we all cherish and we all want, the difficult part is that we have to take that and now move into the state of moderation with how we live. Are we using too many things? Are we buying too many things? Are we eating too many things? Are we thinking too many things? We need to calm everything down. Do less. Less is more. Simplicity. This is what you see over and over again in healthy societies. The simple life, the life of moderation. So I don't know that we can really go beyond the ever-present now, right? We have to think about this is the only moment that matters. And what's the point of living to be 120 if you're going to poison the environment, you don't like yourself, you treat other people like shit? It seems like a pretty stupid thing. But if you live to 120 or 150 and you're treating the planet with respect, you're bringing everybody else joy and happiness, you love yourself, you're excited to be here, you appreciate the little things, all of a sudden that takes on a new meaning. So I think the last thing that I really want to share with you and to stress is that this idea of longevity is not a solo act. It is not you doing the right things and finding your community because community is healthy for you and therefore I'm going to get longevity. It's this idea of interbeing with other humans, with the planet, with other organisms, with everything around you, the soil. We have to bring this idea, this awareness to a greater state and incorporate all life around us. Thank you.